The reason that I invited Chris to Scotland is in his tweets he said he'd been to Oban and he'd been to Aberdeen, and I said, listen, you've seen nothing until you've been to Liberton. And so here he is. He took some good pictures of Liberton, incidentally, from the space station. I know that maybe you'll appear in some of the slides. Now, Scotland has something of a space tradition. Famously, Neil Armstrong had Scottish ancestry, and there was a Freeman and Langham in the borders. And I'm delighted to say that Chris has got Scottish ancestry as well, also from the borders. And we're also in Scotland about to launch our first satellite next year. It's a nano satellite. Does anybody know what a nano satellite is? Any ideas? Any ideas at all? A nano satellite. Like, let's say I called it a micro satellite. What would a micro satellite be? Yeah, the Scottish satellite's about this size, which is great because it makes it incredibly cheap. And it's a company called Clyde Space are launching it from the very same place that Chris landed in a Soyuz vehicle. Will be launched in February, and it's got about 7 or 8 experiments on this nano satellite. So we don't dominate the world of big satellites, but Scotland is aiming to be dominant in nano, extremely small and cheap satellites. So we're going to have more. There won't be room for you in it, Chris, but nonetheless, it'll be a Scottish first in space in February. Chris obviously is famous for a range of reasons, as the head teacher said. He's been in space 3 times. He's been both in the shuttle and in the Russian craft. He's been in both space stations. He's completed spacewalks. He's come back again, which is good because otherwise he wouldn't be able to be here. But nonetheless, his biggest claim to fame, international fame, and 19 million hits on YouTube is when he sang his cover version of Space Oddity, which he may well do for us again today. Who knows if we ask him nicely enough. But look, this is a tremendous boost for the school. It's a tremendous honour for Scotland. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, can we give a huge Scottish Liberton welcome to Commander Chris Hadfield.
First Minister, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to be able to join all of you this afternoon. I would like to talk about some of the aspects of spaceflight that are just so challenging and interesting in the experiences that I've had. But more importantly, I'd like to just have a conversation with you and see if we can answer any questions that you may have. I think I'll talk about one of 2 things, and we'll see if we get some slides up later. But 2 of the most magnificent parts of spaceflight are spacewalking, what it's like to put on a spacesuit and go outside of the spaceship, to see the world from through the visor and the glass of your spacesuit itself. And the other is a launch, to ride a rocket ship to space. And I've ridden 3 different rocket ships to take you from a chair like the one you're sitting in and get you going 17,500 miles an hour in about 8 minutes. What it's like to have a chance to ride those 2 things. So that's fine. So which of those 2 would you like to talk about? You want to talk about spacewalking or about riding a rocket ship? Spacewalking? Spacewalking. Okay. So let's, would you be a volunteer for me?
Yeah.
Stand up here beside me if you would, please. What's your name?
Rory.
Rody?
Rory.
Rory, excuse me. Nice to meet you, Rory. Okay, so Rory and I are going to make a comparison between what it's like to be here on Earth and what it's like to be outside on a spacewalk. So if I'm the guy on Earth and Rory's the one who's in space right now, when I want to breathe, I inhale, and the air is actually pushed into my body because there's a huge stack of air above me, and there's air pressure around me as a result. Well, if Rory's out in space, he's in the vacuum of space. There's absolutely no air at all, nothing. So if he tried to inhale, nothing would happen. In fact, his lungs would be collapsed because of the fact that there's no air pressure in his body. So the first thing that would kill Rory in space would be a lack of air. He wouldn't be able to breathe. Within a very short period of time, he'd start to die because of lack of oxygen. So the first thing Rory's going to need is a balloon around his body to keep him alive. And so you could just put him inside like a big beach ball full of oxygen, and Rory'd be okay for a while. So we'll start with that. Rory's inside a big circular ball of oxygen, and so are all of we, really. If you think about the world and the ball of oxygen around it, we just have a different sized ball. But now Rory's going to go outside on a spacewalk for a reason, and that's to go fix something or build something. So we need a suit that gives him some dexterity with his hands. So we're not just going to have a ball around him, we're actually going to put a suit on him that has the pressure on the inside of it, sort of like wearing a custom-made balloon. And that's really what a spacesuit is a custom-built balloon. But if you put a balloon around Rory, it would sort of be like this, and he'd be all stiff with the stiffness of the balloon. It wouldn't be able to bend at all. Whereas here, my clothes are flexible. If this was made of tin or of steel, then I'd be stuck like that. And to have an inflated suit is sort of like that way, where you can't even bend your arms. So we actually build a suit that has a big hinge here and a hinge here, a hinge at your wrist so you can turn it, a helmet that's on a hinge, and another hinge at the waist, so that Rory could in fact turn his body at the waist and can move his arms a little bit. But that's all you get inside your spacesuit. So it's a custom-built suit that has hinges at the important parts, so that a custom-built balloon, so that you can move. And then the dome on your head. And then, let's see, what else we're going to need. You need really good ability to use your hands. But if you're inflated, every time you squeeze your hand, it's sort of like squeezing a tennis ball. It's about that level of exercise. So there's a special design of glove that comes over and actually has a palm bar in it that squeezes super hard all the time, so that it holds the glove in against your hand, so that Rory could then flex his fingers and not have to fight all the pressure of the suit. So that's inside the suit. And then Rory and I are about the same size, but some of the astronauts are a little bigger, a little shorter, so we need custom-built suits, and they've got rings in them that make the legs certain different lengths, and there are 3 different type of, or size of chest pieces. You'd be a large. He'd wear a large, I think, and there's an extra large and a medium. So Rory's wearing his large upper piece. Okay, so now you've got a suit that's a balloon. It's got palm bars. It's the right size for your body. And now you just need your life support equipment. Because when I exhale, when all of us exhale, what comes out is kind of used up air. We've ingested some of the oxygen. We've turned it into carbon dioxide. We're releasing carbon dioxide. If we just put Rory inside his balloon, after a minute or two, his whole suit would fill up with carbon dioxide and he'd start suffocating. So on his back here is a big air purifying system. Just like here, the air is pumped around the room, it exchanges to the outside, and the trees and the grass use up the carbon dioxide to release oxygen. Rory's going to have something on his back, a chemical called lithium hydroxide, that will remove the carbon dioxide from the air, and then he's got a big tank of oxygen back here that's slowly leaking oxygen in just above his head so that he can keep breathing oxygen. So that'll keep him alive. Now let's talk temperature. What is it here today? About 8 degrees or so, maybe outside, I think, Celsius. Well, in space, if that's the sun, Rory's chest is about 150 degrees. And his back is about minus 120 degrees, because there's no air to move the temperature around at all. So your suit not only has to protect you against the vacuum of space, but it somehow has to protect you so that this side of you is plus 150 degrees, hotter than boiling water. And his back is minus 120, like dry ice, like lying on a red hot stove with a big block of dry ice on your back. So you have to have a suit that will protect you thermally. So it's multi layers thick. And then you need a cooling system on the back, and it has a little evaporator on the back. And that's pumping the coolant all around your body. So in fact, underneath the suit, he's wearing long underwear that has tubes in it, miles and miles of tubes, and it's pumping water all the way around your body, collecting that heat or cooling it, taking it around to the back, and running it through a flash evaporator at the back so that you'll keep your suit at the right temperature. There's actually a dial right here where you can control the temperature of your suit. A little bit like Iron Man. You can control the temperature of his suit right there. So we've taken care of his oxygen and his temperature regulation. You need to be able to communicate with Houston or whoever you're talking to. So there's a helmet attached that have ear cups on it and microphone booms that come around your mouth. And then there's a radio mounted right here on the top. And your hot mic all the time. So every word you say, every breath you take is constantly transmitted back to Houston. What else do you need? Oh, So Rory's working outside, and he's weightless the whole time. So you want to hold on, right, when you're working. But while you're working away, if your hand slips off, then you're going to float off into the universe. And they name a school or something after you because you'll be gone forever. So we don't really want that to happen. So you need to somehow not float off into space. So you have a bunch of tools attached to your chest, including a tether or a clip that you could clip onto the station. And it would be on a reel, sort of like a fishing reel. So you could float maybe 20 meters away, and then this reel would pull you back in again. But if that reel failed, you'd float off forever. So the last thing we're going to put on Rory's spacesuit is a jetpack. And we actually have a jetpack on our spacesuits as well. And it's mounted on the back, and it's got little thruster holes here and 4 thruster holes here, and it's pressurized by a big tank of nitrogen that's right down here, because nitrogen's a nice heavy gas. It's got a lot of atomic mass to it. So if Rory got tumbled off the station and his little tether came loose, then what you do is you'd pull a handle right here, and a joystick would pop out in front of you. A little joystick. You'd grab it, you'd turn it on, and that would activate your whole nitrogen system, and then you could actually grab it with both hands and fly your spacesuit around so that you get yourself stopped tumbling, and then turn yourself, and then fire the thrusters till you could go over and grab back onto the spaceship again. If you see the movie Gravity, it's sort of like that, sort of like George Clooney's flying around in, or what Sandra Bullock's flying around in. Same sort of idea. So I think we've taken care of your complete spacesuit. I think that's the whole thing. One last thing that happened to me. You're going to be inside your spacesuit for about 8 hours, because by the time you get all dressed and then you have to go outside and work. So you're locked inside your spacesuit for 8 hours. So 8 hours without a sip of water is tough. So actually mounted right in here in front of Rory's chest is sort of a flush-mounted bag of water, and in the top of it there's a little spigot sticking up with a bite valve. When you bite it, you can then suck water out of the tank. So that's for drinking. Mine started leaking, and water started floating up around in front of my face and in front of my eyes, and one of those globs of water picked up some contamination on it and went into my left eye, and my left eye went blind on my first spacewalk. So I was blind in my left eye after partway through my first spacewalk, and it hurt. It was like someone had just put, I don't know, pepper oil in my eye or something. So you're wearing a helmet. You can't do anything about it. You can't rub your eye, and without gravity, your tear doesn't go anywhere. You know, your eye starts tearing up, but it doesn't drain. The way that tears work is there's a little tear duct right above your eyelid here that it's sort of a modified sweat gland, and it releases a liquid down onto your eye that is a tear, and then that drains down your cheek, and it also, the tear duct is in right next to your nose, and that's why your nose runs when you tear also, because it goes into your tear duct and down into your nose. So what happened to me up there is my tears collected on my eye, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, until eventually this big ball of contaminated tear got so big that it crossed across the bridge of my nose and went into my other eye. And now both my eyes were contaminated, and I was blind outside of my first spacewalk, which was not a good place to be, blind on a spacewalk. And so you don't want to be blind during your first spacewalk. It's no fun at all. And I didn't know what to do. So I just called down to Houston, and they thought maybe that instead of just that contamination coming from my water bag, they thought the lithium hydroxide in my back had somehow broken into my suit and was contaminating the air. And so they had me open a valve on the side of my helmet and let my oxygen hiss out into space to try and clear up the contamination. So imagine if you're outside on your first spacewalk, you're blind, and now you're listening to your oxygen hiss out into space, waiting for something good to happen. And that happened on my first time outside. And after about a half hour, eventually my eyes just teared enough that it started diluting the contamination, and it was evaporating off my eyes. And eventually I could see through the contamination again. And after a while I could see again and get back to work. But it was a pretty amazing thing to happen during my first spacewalk. And we stayed outside of my first spacewalk for about 8 hours. And I think that is a lot of stuff, all about walking in space and what it feels like to walk in space. So how about a big hand for Rory for being my beautiful model today? Thank you very much, Rory. Appreciate it. Thank you. That's a little introduction to what it's like to go outside on a spacewalk. The only part I didn't talk about was how beautiful it is to be out in between the world and the universe, and having the whole world rolling by next to you while you're holding onto a spaceship with one hand and with the whole universe out the other direction. To be in between the universe and the world is a beautiful, humbling place to be. And it's something I dreamed about since I was a little kid, and an amazing thing to be part of. Gave me a whole new perspective on the world. So what I'd like to do now is see if anybody in the room has any questions, and I'll do my best to try and answer them. And we can talk about spacewalking or any other part of spaceflight. I'd be happy to. Yes?
In your opinion, what do you think is the easiest thing to do on Earth that is real hard to do on the space station?
In my opinion, what's the easiest thing to do on Earth that is hard to do on the space station? So you have like runners on or sneakers on. You don't normally wear shoes on a spaceship because you don't stand on your feet. You actually have just socks all the time, or even bare feet. And you can use your feet like a monkey and use your feet to hold on to things while you're using your hands. But if you're going to use the exercise equipment, then you put on sneakers or running. Do you call them sneakers or running shoes? Or trainers. Okay, you put on a set of trainers, right? So on Earth, when you're going to do up your trainers, typically this is how you do it, right? You get down on one knee, you get both hands, and your body's nice and stable due to gravity. You don't normally do up your trainer like this because it's kind of hard to balance and a little bit wobbly. If you're floating weightless and you want to put your trainer on, oddly enough, of course, that means you're going to have one foot and both hands busy at one time. And it's really hard to stabilize yourself without gravity, just with your one toe hooked under something. So one of the hardest things to do, I found on the space station, was to put on my running shoe, to put on my trainer. Because no matter how hard I tried, partway through I would be floating and tumbling around the spaceship and bumping into things with one of my trainers floating off into the distance just while I'm trying to get this one. And you'd be always bumping into somebody else and apologizing for being so clumsy. Even after 5 months, I couldn't put my shoes on properly, oddly enough. So weightlessness is not always just a benefit. Sometimes it's a burden. Any other questions? Yes?
How do you eat?
How do you eat? Well, let's just talk with water simply to start with. Water is the most important thing you need. This water came out of the tap, and there's some big water purification plant somewhere in Edinburgh that provided the water for this. So we need some sort of system on board that provides us water. So we have a whole water purification plant on board that takes our sewage and turns it back into drinking water. So that's where our water comes from a sewage treatment plant on board. And it's our own sewage, which is a little personal, but it works. And then when it's time to eat, you'd go to the pantry because there's no refrigerator, there's no fresh food, and there's no oven. So you just go to the pantry and you bring out, say, I don't know, what do you like to eat? Pizza. Okay. So you go to the dehydrated pizza, and it would have been made years ago, and it's a dehydrated pizza in a little slice, and you take it and you'd go over to the wall, and out of the wall there's a little needle sticking out of the wall that looks like the type of needle that you blow up a basketball with. And you take your little package, and it's got a little septum on it, a little soft spot. You'd slide that over the needle, and you'd read on the package of pizza, and it would say like 3 ounces hot. So you'd dial 3 ounces, you'd push hot, and it would squirt 3 ounces of hot water into your little pizza bag. And then you gently shake it up, and the pizza, which had been dehydrated, would soak up the water, and then you'd let it sit in there for, it would say, wait 10 minutes. So you'd wait 10 minutes. And then you'd carefully cut it open and peel it back, and now you have rehydrated, slightly warm pizza. It's not very good. And that's how almost all our food is done. We rehydrate it with water out of the wall, and it works okay. We have a little warming oven, too, just to warm things up. There's no fresh food, and there's no really complicated food. It's all little packages of food, tins of food, that type of thing. But every ship that comes up brings up fresh food. So maybe once every 6 weeks you'll get an apple, or something like that. But otherwise, the food it's sort of like being on a camping trip forever, or on a sailing trip or something like that the whole time. All right? Yes?
You ever had jelly in space?
Say again?
You ever had jelly in space?
Jelly?
Jelly.
Jelly, like jam and jelly? And
Yeah, just
Oh,
jelly.
yeah. Yeah, we have little packets of stuff because the food gets kind of boring.
Look at that. Also, so another question. Have you ever squirted it out of the bag and then sort of chased after it and then caught your mouth?
We do. In fact, if you think about it, every time you open a little thing of jelly like that, there's often one tiny little bit of it that falls on just do it over your plate. A little bit falls on the plate. If you open it in 0G, that little bit of jelly will tumble off, tick, 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 and go tink into the wall. And in our kitchen, the whole wall and ceiling and floor is covered with little specks of jelly and honey and ketchup and all the little things from all the little things that you've opened. And after every meal, you take one of the wet wipes and you go around and you just clean parts of the wall because there's nothing falls on the floor. So it's a perpetual sort of fountain of mess that you have to clean up. But if you take one of those and you squeeze it, yeah, it'll just float in front of you. So then you can just go around and pick it like a fish, where you've dropped fish food into a tank, and you can eat the food that way with all different types of food. We have squeezy cheese and whatever's handy, anything that'll keep a long time. Yes.
What was it like coming back to Earth?
What was it like coming back to Earth? I came back on 2 different spaceships. I came back on the American Space Shuttle and on the Russian Soyuz. They come back quite differently. The space shuttle has wings. And wings are no good to you through your whole flight until you're coming back to land. Up until then, they've just been dead weight. So if you're designing a spaceship, you need to decide if you want to have wings or not, because wings are a lot of extra penalty, and they only serve you a purpose for landing. But the beauty of them is, on a space shuttle, when you come in, first you have to slow down, and we use friction with the air to slow down. And so the shuttle comes in actually with its nose 40 degrees in the air, so kind of a big flat plate. And it's quite gentle at first, and it's kind of bleed off the heat bleed off the speed through heat. And only as you start slowing down, then you start pointing into the wind, and then it flies like a big glider to come around and land again. And it's not that much different than landing on an airliner. It feels somewhat the same, a little higher G, but it's just a glider coming back from space on wings. The Soyuz, though, is wildly different. The Soyuz, I'm looking for something that's Soyuz-like here. What'll be a nice prop? I'll use this. So this is my Soyuz spaceship coming back to Earth. And we're sitting inside this little can. It's actually more shaped like this. And it's got a big flat bottom on it and kind of a small top. And we turn it around backwards and we fire the engine to get slowed down. And then instead of having a circular orbit around the world, we have a slightly crooked orbit. And the low part of the orbit starts getting into the atmosphere. So the Soyuz, instead of going around the world, partway around the world, it starts to touch the atmosphere. And that drag, sort of like sticking your hand out the window of your car, that drag of the air starts to slow the Soyuz down. And you're going so fast that, in your car, if you're going on a highway or a motorway and you stick your hand out, the force in your hand is huge. Imagine if you were in a Formula F1 car and you stuck your hand out, you could wreck your elbow or break your arm just by sticking it out the window. On a Soyuz, if you stuck your hand out the window, the friction from the air would burn your arm off. It would just melt your arm off. It's that much friction and heat, just like rubbing your hands together. So this thing coming into the atmosphere with you sitting in it, it has a blast furnace of heat around it, about 3,000 degrees coming into the atmosphere. And as it comes in, of course, it's slowing down. It flows. You're kind of squished down into the floor of it because it's almost like falling into water. So you're squished about 4 or 5 times your normal weight coming back in. So if you can imagine sitting in your chair right now with 4 or 5 people lying on top of you, that's the kind of weight that's on your body. And it's quite violent, too, as it forces way through the atmosphere. But then finally, as it slows down and gets a little closer to the surface, a parachute opens. And then you're just dangling under the parachute, coming down until just before you hit the ground. And then it's got little rockets on the bottom, like gunpowder pyrotechnics. And they fire just to cushion you just before you hit the world, so you don't hit the ground like that. So instead, you hit the ground and survive it, and your vehicle doesn't get crushed, and you don't get crushed with it. But you land in Kazakhstan in a windy place with no trees, so you don't just come down like this and land. You're actually coming down a little bit sideways, and you hit the ground and tumble. So when you hit the ground, your spaceship tumbles end over end. So imagine you've been weightless for half a year, and now suddenly you crash to the earth, and your vehicle's going bang, 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 like someone threw a soda can on the ground and tumble to a stop. It's a really violent way to come home. And when you finish, you're just laying on your side in the dirt of Kazakhstan, waiting for someone to come and open up the hatch and drag you out and start readapting to living on Earth again. It's a violent way to come home. Yes?
What is the worst effects you get from space?
What's the worst effects you get from space? Depends how you measure worst. Initially, you feel really bad. You feel really nauseous. You're dizzy, your body doesn't know how to balance, and so you feel like throwing up a lot. So initially, it's nausea is the worst. And then you can't balance properly for 3 or 4 days. So when you're trying to walk, you keep bumping into things and falling over. You can't balance with your eyes closed at all. And it's because your body's gotten used to being weightless. So it takes a while for your body to remember what to do with gravity. And I couldn't run for about 4 months after I got back, because just the pounding of running your legs on the ground is sort of like throwing your blood down towards the ground, and your body can't get the blood back up to your head again. So it took about 4 months before I could properly run. And maybe the worst, though, is still going on right now, and that is my body dissolved some of the bone while I was in space. I lost about 8% of the bone across my hips, and the big bone that's in your leg, my femur. It dissolved about 8% of the bone out of there because it just didn't need it. And I'm slowly growing that bone back now. And it's called osteoporosis, osteobone porosis, porous with holes in it. So I had osteoporosity that is slowly reversing now. My bones are starting to become dense again, but that'll take about a year for me to get back to my original bone density. So I think that might be the worst, is the long range. And then finally, we don't know, maybe I have higher radiation. It's like getting an X-ray a day living on the space station. So I may have a slightly bigger chance of getting cancer than I would have if I'd stayed, here in Edinburgh the whole time, close to sea level. And we think maybe because of the radiation, we may have problems with our vision when we get old, maybe higher chance of cataracts or something like that. But we don't think so. We think we've kept the levels low enough that it'll be okay. So there's a lot of changes to the body. Yes?
What is space?
What does the universe look like from space? It's hard to see because you go around the world every 90 minutes. If you want to see the night sky, you can't just run out from inside a building and see the night sky, because your eyes take a certain amount of time to adjust, right? For the rods and the cones to be ready and for your pupil to open up wide. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to get good night vision, to let your eyes really adapt to darkness. Well, if you go around the world every 90 minutes, that means you get a sunrise or a sunset every 45 minutes. If you think about that being the sun. Sunrise, 45 minutes, sunset. Sunrise, sunset. So that means it only gives you maximum about 40 minutes of dark on the other side. And if it takes 15 minutes just for your eyes to adjust, then somewhere in your 40-minute night, you've got to leave 15 minutes of somewhere inside your spaceship of shutting off all the lights and waiting 15 minutes for your eyes to adjust, and then going to a window to look outside. And so you don't often do that. It's like you don't normally look at the night sky from inside your house, probably, because you never shut off all the lights and just wait. So it's a long way to answer the question, but it's that we don't very often get a chance to look at the universe from the spaceship, just because you go day-night so often and you're working most of the time. But I did sometimes, and especially when I was out on a spacewalk, I did. And what you see is an immensely deep blackness, a blackness that it's like a black with texture. It's like a black, sort of like black velvet, but without any shininess to it at all. It's like a maybe some nights out here you can see the Milky Way where it's really nice and dark, and if you let your eyes adjust, and you can see the texture of the stars and the dust of the universe and how it's backlit from the stars, the deep darkness of it. And space looks like that. When we were designing our crew patch, there was a space for the black sky, and we asked the patch designer to make it really black. And he made it black. And we said, well, you know, that's black, but it's not black enough. Can you make it blacker than that? And he was like, well, it's already black. How black can I make the sky? It's just that the black is so deep and textured, and it's like looking into a bottomless well of darkness. It's gorgeous. And then the stars are just perfect points of light. Like they don't twinkle, they don't shimmer, because there's no atmosphere in the way. So they're just a million tiny, perfect little points of light in the blackness. It's beautiful. Yes?
What do you miss the most when you're on the space station?
What do I miss the most when I'm on the space station? Apart from good pizza. I think mostly you just miss the physical contact of having your family around. You know, being able to hug people that you love, and just having family members close. Because I talk to them every day via email and Skype and even on the telephone sometimes. But you just miss the presence of people around. You know, like if you just think of all the people around you and how close other bodies are, and just what that feels like to have people near you, you miss that. And so I think what you miss most is just being close to your family. But it's not bad. I never felt homesick. I was busy and challenged and active the whole time. But once in a while it would have been nice to be able to give one of my kids a hug, for sure. I think that's what I missed. Maybe one more question and then we're done. Yes?
Have you ever spent any special occasions in space?
Did we spend any special occasions in space? Yeah. It's the International Space Station, so the crews are from all around the world. So they don't celebrate the same holidays in each country, of course. Each country has different holidays based on religion or history or whatever. And so if you had an International Space Station, you could have a lot of special occasions, right? You could say today it is whatever, Victory Day in Russia, or a civic holiday in Canada, or whatever. You could have holidays all the time on Space Station, because it's always a holiday somewhere. But instead, the space agency says, we want you to work, so you get to choose one special day every 6 weeks. And as a crew, we had to sit down before launch and choose which special days we wanted. Each person got to choose which ones they thought, and then we chose those ones, like Valentine's Day, Christmas, Victory Day, you know, a few others. And so we do. And we try and celebrate them just like on Earth. So Christmas is coming up right now, and I was in space for Christmas last year. So we had Christmas off, and so we had Christmas stockings that we hung up inside the space station. We had a Christmas tree hanging down from the ceiling. We played Christmas music. I brought along a Christmas card for each person from their family as a surprise, which was nice. We had a guitar up there, so we sang Christmas carols. And it was nice. It wasn't a normal Christmas, but it was sort of like Christmas. And for a lot of people who are away from their family, whether it's military or working or whatever, it was a Christmas away from home. And just like the guys up there this year, you bring the traditions and the history of the Earth with you when you go, and the things that are special to you. And so yeah, we have special days up there, and you celebrate them as best you can. I think we're out of time. So, but thank you very much for all of the good questions. And Rory, thank you for the help. Appreciate it. Thank you.